Good Monday evening, everyone. This is Daniel Crawley and Chief Meteorologist Christopher White. We are here tonight. It is that time of year, folks. The 2022-23 Winter Outlook. And Chris, we've been looking at this for a little while. And tell me what you see so far.
Very interesting winter forecast coming up here. So taking a look over all of things, we're looking at several things, right, Dan? So we're looking at the mid-latitude Pacific Ocean temperatures. We're looking at the northern Pacific temperatures. We're looking at the sea surface temperatures out in the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico. And we're also looking at those teleconnections and how all of that can really work together to become a big influencer of winter weather in our area.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how things evolve. We've seen some things here in the last month or so that have kind of piqued our interest a little bit, and they may have some influence into the weather for the winter as well. But before we start, let's give a shout out to our folks at Paloma,
Absolutely.
located at 131 Independence Boulevard, Morganton. They are our sponsors this year, once again, for the Winter Outlook. If you like good Mexican food, head out to Paloma.
Paloma, great people. You won't find them any better than those folks there, and the food is just as good.
Yeah, definitely is, Chris. We visit there frequently.
We are frequent flyers.
If we are there and it's good, trust me, it's good food.
Yep.
So let's look at the outlook and let's go over these headlines right quick, Chris. We talked a little bit about it just a second ago. We entered the third year of the negative ENSO state, or as you hear more commonly, the La Nina. Of course, the La Nina is the general cooling of waters, or the cooler than normal waters in the equatorial Pacific. Chris, this is really an interesting thing in the fact that the La Nina is solid for its third year. We've not seen that in a very long time, have we?
It has been a long time, and you did some research into that of when the last time this occurred, and it's been a while since it has occurred there. So the Pacific waters are much cooler than average. There's some signals as we go late in the winter. In the spring, things may start to equal out a little bit, but will it be in time to help us out with precipitation?
Yeah, that's still up for debate. But this La Nina has been going on for a while. It's still moderate as it's classified, and it looks to continue at least through the first half or so of the winter. And like you said, it may try to head more toward neutral as we head toward the end of the winter.
That's kind of the wild card in this forecast.
Yeah, if that were to speed up or slow down, it could influence the forecast as well.
Yep.
The other thing, of course, the La Nina, the ENSO states are based off the water in the equatorial Pacific region. We've seen a lot of warmer than normal water off the west coast of the U.S., south of Alaska, and it's been a while since we've had that as well. But one of the things that can lead to is a blocking pattern over the northern hemisphere. And we've seen some of that already last month in October. We had that really cold day, I believe it's toward the middle of October, where temperatures were in the 40s during the day with sunshine. I mean, that's the kind of temperatures that you see in the middle of January, but we had them in October.
We were like 30 degrees below average that one day in there. So, if that would have been in the heart of winter, you could have easily seen temperatures top out somewhere in the teens, single digits in the mountains, if that would have occurred in the winter months.
Yeah, and that blocking occurs when warmer water is off the west coast there in the northern and northeast Pacific. And basically that warm water, the heights rise, you get those big, tall what we call P&A ridges that develop, and what that does is it just sends the air straight out of the Arctic Circle down in North America, and it usually impacts us here in the southeast.
Yep.
That can offset what would be a normal La Nina, and we talked about that at the very start. Those two things are going to play against each other as we head into the winter. And again, the clash of the global teleconnections we feel are going to lead to that wild pattern swing throughout the winter.
Absolutely. So you get those big ridges off the Pacific Northwest up into Alaska. They can dig the jet stream very far south there. And depending on how far south that jet stream, the northern jet stream gets, you could spawn up a Gulf low, bring it up into the East Coast, or maybe even if it's strong enough, it would go west of us. You remember,
Yes.
we're looking back at 2018-19 winter, I believe, when Texas ended up with the brunt of that cold air that come out of the Pacific Northwest with the P&A. And the other part of that, you have to look, we look at the Siberian snowpack. Back up over Siberia coming into October, it come out of the gate swinging. I mean, it was hammering it down with snow there. You got toward late November, it started, I'm sorry, late October, it started evening out, and now it's actually running below what is normal there. So how much cold air will be available for that P&A to tap into, and how much will it modify as it comes down into the greater United States?
Yeah, that's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on, especially the early part of the winter, I would say.
Yeah.
Let's look at the sea surface temperatures that we talked about across the basically the whole equatorial Pacific of the globe, and you can see the greens right here extending from the coast of South America all the way back to almost the international date line. That is the La Nina signature that we talked about. That's that colder than normal temperatures, water temperatures in that part of the Pacific. And normally that equates here in North America to more sunshine, warmer temperatures, less precipitation.
Yeah. And you take that, and we go back last year, we talked about it going 3 years on now. It absolutely has. Last year, the MJO was able, the Madden-Julian oscillation, which is the thunderstorms back over the Indian Ocean, and how far east or west they are, determines where that MJO lines up, phase 1, 2, 3, all the way to 8. And that, if it plays out right, can overcome the La Nina, and it can open up its own Pineapple Express with bringing that southern jet through Hawaii, but bringing the moisture out of the Indian Ocean across instead of getting it from the equatorial Pacific. So there, it doesn't look like that's going to be a huge player this year like it was last year. We were able to keep precipitation fairly normal last winter. This winter, it doesn't look like that's going to happen, but things could change.
Yeah, and we also talked about the normal waters in the Pacific, again, where that ridging likes to develop sometimes in the winter. It's going to be the battle. Are you going to have warmer, drier air overcome the southeast for a lot of the winter? Are you going to have those intrusions of cold air? Are you going to have any storms come together during that? And you was talking about the MJO earlier. If you can get a good intrusion of cold air and you're in an MJO phase where you're getting good lift, then you may have the perfect scenario of getting a major winter storm somewhere on the East Coast.
Yeah, we watched that Madden-Julian oscillation because about 2 weeks from where it goes into phase 7, 8, and then a little into 1, you can really forecast. You can't pinpoint anything, but you can see a pattern that could develop over the eastern, or over the whole United States, but eventually into our area in the eastern 2/3 of the country.
Yeah, and that is something when we don't talk about it as much publicly until you get within the 7-day forecast period. But when the MJO gets into that phase, we usually look for something. And
Yeah.
again, like you said, 10 to 14 days out, you can kind of get a heads up. Hey, we're going to go into this phase. We might be on the lookout for something potential happen. So a lot of variables that we talked about that goes into the weather pattern. Now, this is our synoptic, basically at the jet stream level, the things that steer the storm systems from west to east across the country. This is what we see as our primary pattern going into the winter time, and it's going to be a very La Nina look. It's a zonal flow straight out of the Pacific, generally milder air, and that storm track is basically going to run from the southern plains up into the Ohio Valley. Now, the northern part of the country can have some cold weather during La Ninas, but you can see in the orange over the bulk of the southeast, we tend to be south of that battle line, and we tend to end up being fairly mild.
Yep, and that is the primary pattern. You saw those warm Pacific waters, so it's going to take the Pacific North American oscillation to really pump that ridge, to pump that jet stream up into Alaska to tap into some of that air. like you see here with our secondary pattern.
Yeah, this secondary pattern is something that we really have to watch. We talked about having that back in October, there for about a 2 to 3 day period. It was really cold. You get that PNA ridge to pump up into Alaska and up into the Arctic Circle, and it just everything comes out of the northwest. Now, sometimes it can be so severe that it's an overwhelming cold to where you're just really cold. There's no moisture involved. And, we had that a couple times last year in January.
Yeah.
We had those real light snow events that formed right over us.
Yep.
They got a little bit heavier, actually, as they got toward the coast of the Carolinas. Right. Probably remember that toward late January. We had that occur, and we may see that again. But when you get into this kind of secondary pattern, it does increase your chances because with everything coming down northwest, it allows storms to dig and go far to the south.
And let's leave it on this for just a second, Daniel. Let's talk about a secondary oscillation. The two that we look at, the Arctic oscillation and that North Atlantic oscillation. I'm watching for early winter where we had the polar vortex is already up and going. It started around the 5th of October this year. It developed, and we are seeing it deepen, and it's starting to tap into the stratosphere a little bit. So as it happens, your stratosphere can warm. That forces the polar vortex south somewhat. If you get a tilt of the oscillations there to the negative tilt and a PNA tilt to the positive side at the same time, that's really getting in the grooves there. But that is the scenario that you would want to see, because as that PNA boosts and ridges up into Alaska, you can get that jet stream to dig just enough to develop a Gulf low that comes up. And if you've been around North Carolina anytime, or the Southeast, that's where the Southeast gets their snow from. Those I-85 storms that come right up out of the Pacific and track, for our area specifically, you would want them to track just south of Atlanta over into towards Columbia, and in between Columbia and Charlotte, and then north and east. That could happen. That could happen in a secondary pattern, especially early winter, where we get the polar vortex to stretch and dig a little south there.
And that's kind of a myth in meteorology, and when people listen to stuff on social media and stuff. When we talk about the polar vortex, that's basically what's happening in the wintertime. From time to time, it will stretch. It will extend more north to south than in a circular fashion. And that is really how the cold air comes into North America and the United States. It doesn't actually break off and come all the way down like some people want you to believe. It just, with the jet stream and with different things going on and blocking, it just stretches that pool of cold air.
You remember we had this, I can't remember, maybe 2015, I think, maybe, where we had the polar vortex. A piece of it comes out. There was the headlines all over the news.
Yes, it was.
In the newspapers, there was a polar vortex coming. Well, take that stuff with a grain of salt. The polar vortex is a weather phenomenon that occurs in the winter, and just like Daniel said, it stretches. It doesn't really come down itself down into the southeastern U.S.
No, it doesn't.
Get cold shots of air from.
Yeah, and the good thing about it, when you get into that kind of pattern, it's usually a quick mover. It's in maybe 48 hours, and then you quickly moderate. We're just so far south, you can only stay so cold for so long.
That's right.
So let's look at some details for our coverage area. First off, let's go with temperatures. This is something we kind of debated over when putting this together. The La Nina would want you to believe that we're going to be generally milder than normal, but we feel with some confidence there's going to be some cold air intrusions.
Yeah, you get
this
those
year.
And this is looking, remember, this isn't looking at one day. This is not looking at a week, not even a month. This is looking over a 3-month period, meteorological winter, from December to February, December 1st to February the 28th. And we're talking about those temperatures as they average out as a whole, not any one given day or week.
Yeah, and I know this map is zoomed in to our specific 8-county coverage area, but we feel like that pretty much most of us is going to be near normal for temperatures. We feel like it's going to kind of balance itself out. And as you can see on our scale, near normal is what we consider within a half degree either way. As you get a little bit further south, and we do have that including some of our areas along the North Carolina South Carolina line, you may be a little bit warmer than that, so we're going above normal. We don't see any temperatures that are below normal. The temperatures really kind of fit the La Nina mold, but we feel like that the blocking that we could see at times will kind of help temper a little bit too.
And you've got people slinging paper balls at us and kids like spitting spit wads at the camera and the screen right now. But you can get snow in a winter where you have near or above normal temperatures. Again, it's those cold air intrusions working at the right time where you can get a Gulf low or some type of precipitation maker over the southeast, and you get those snowfall events. So don't look at this and say, winter's over, let's move on. For winter lovers out there, this is just showing overall over a 3-month period when we average things out come March 1st and look back over the winter months. This is where we think we're going to land.
And if you're a snow lover, Chris, I would much rather see all that yellow than seeing red overtake the area.
Absolutely.
I would be kind of worried about snow if everybody in our coverage area was in the red.
Right.
So let's look at precipitation, and this is kind of an unfortunate thing. It seems to be a theme really for a good part of 2022 so far. We have been at or just below normal. That really is another characteristic of the La Nina. And for overall precipitation, we're talking about rain, sleet, snow, whatever falls. Unfortunately, most of the Carolinas is probably going to end up below normal again. That could be some concerns for fires potentially now, especially that all the leaves are off the trees and stuff, and it's down on the ground for the winter, and you don't want to get into a really dry, no rain, low humidity, and a lot of wind. That could end up with the fire danger.
And all the vegetation dies
yes.
this year too. I mean, when you get the hard freezes and stuff like we've already had, that could do the leaf litter and any of the growing grasses. When it turns brown, it dies, it goes dormant. So you could get those wildfires in this type of situation.
Yeah, and the only area that you can really see in the southern Appalachians and western Carolinas that we've got near normal is going to be those northwest flow areas.
Yeah, those northwest facing slopes where they get that aided extra lift just from the mountain escarpment being there on the west side, where it lifts that moisture up from the Great Lakes and brings it out over the mountains. But down here over the foothills, unfortunately, we don't fare too well in those scenarios, because as the air comes off those mountains, sinking air always warms and it compresses, and you can't get precipitation with warming and compressing air.
Chris, the only thing I think that could potentially bust this part of the forecast is if we end up with some kind of an acceleration in the INSO state toward normal, maybe at the end of the winter.
Yeah, and that certainly could happen. It's hard to tell exactly when that's going to happen. I will tell you this: it looked like as we were doing the winter forecast last year that the INSO state, that La Nina state, was going to go neutral, or maybe even El Nino wise, warmer than normal, which pumps more moisture, and it didn't happen.
No, it sure did.
And we've hung on to La Nina this long, which is very surprising, as we already said.
Yeah. So precipitation, unfortunately, it's going to be below normal, it looks like, through the winter months. Now, the big thing everybody wants to know, you don't do these forecasts unless you start talking about snow. Let's look at the local snowfall averages. These are the 30-year climatological averages for our main population centers across the foothills in Piedmont. You can see along the Interstate 40 corridor from Marion to Morganton, we generally average between 6.5 inches of snow each winter. Ironically, Lenore, being a little bit further north, gets a little bit less. I don't know how that happens. It's just kind of the luck of the draw.
They're kind of in that shadow, though. Lenore, even Morganton, Marion, they're in that shadow. And you see this as you come off that shadow of the mountains, and the totals are a little higher down over Hickory, for instance.
Yeah, Hickory's the one that's funny. That's the highest of anybody in the coverage area.
Yeah.
There's people in Catawba County like, really, Hickory? It is.
It is. You get more snow there than, you say, Morgan or Marion.
Yeah, and then as you work further south, like for Forest City, Generally, those areas deal a lot more from mixing in the winter time when there's winter storms. Forest City averages about 4 inches of snow. Lincolnton about 5 inches, and then once you get down to Shelby, 3.5 inches of snow. And for our folks right on the South Carolina line, they struggle a lot of times to get snow.
They do. It's funny. Mother Nature doesn't have a clue where the interstates sit, and we are all the time referencing the Highway 74 corridor, the Interstate 40 corridor, the Highway 16 corridor, and going east. Mother Nature doesn't have a clue where those are. They just happen to be three really good boundaries that everybody knows that we can pinpoint and help you to understand how the forecast is evolving.
Yeah, it definitely does, Chris. But now it's the time. Let's show everybody our forecast for snow this winter.
But let's first go to a break and see a great video from our folks at Paloma.
Okay, it is now time for a snowfall forecast for the area, and let's show that right quick. Don't want to see precipitation again, do we?
No.
Okay, here we go, folks. Snowfall for the foothills of western Piedmont of North Carolina. And Chris, we've done a lot of debate on this. We are going to go near normal for snowfall. And on our scale, near normal is anywhere within 20% of the yearly average for the areas that we cover. Excuse me. As you head down toward the I-85 corridor, we got them slightly below normal. Could be anywhere from about 50 to 80% of average. And then for our folks in the high country, we talked about northwest flow a little bit earlier, might make the precipitation near normal. I think they have a chance of having some pretty decent events this year, especially with those big dips in the jet stream. So we are going to go slightly above normal for our ski slopes areas on Beach and Sugar, over toward Beulah Dean and Mitchell County, over toward Green Mountain and Yancey County. It could be a pretty interesting year for our folks on the Tennessee border. But this is what we have for our snowfall map for this year. We're going to be close to average, and I want to kind of help with that a little bit again. We talked about the averages. We're actually going to go a little further on this, Chris.
This is what we call out on the limb.
Yeah, this is our limb, and if it breaks, don't hold us accountable. Okay? So really, you look at the numbers in black is the average. These are our predictions for localized areas in the white. Morganton just below its average of around 6.5. We're going to call for about 6 inches of snow in Morganton this year. And really, the trend for the foothills, just a little bit, about a half inch to maybe 1 inch below the average. Then as you head into the Piedmont, same thing. Lincolnton and Shelby being on that borderline. The margin compared to average may be a little bit greater, but this is how we feel with our forecast heading into the winter. It's going to be temperatures close to average. Overall precipitation going to be below normal, unfortunately, but we feel like opportunities are going to be there, Chris, to get some winter weather. Could be the first part of the winter and maybe some toward the end, depending on what happens with some blocking in the Atlantic, or if we get into that potential neutral ENSO. But that is our forecast for the winter for the foothills in western Piedmont of western North Carolina. And Chris, this is what we came up with. I feel like it's a solid forecast and one that we will go with. And again, thanks to our folks at Paloma Mexican Restaurant, located at 131 Independence Boulevard at Morganton, for sponsoring our winter outlook. Any final thoughts?
I just hope we get to use this green screen behind us a lot this winter with tracking winter weather systems as they come through the southeast. Folks, if you love winter, stick around. These forecasts are based off the scientific facts that we have right now. Things can change as you go and the winter evolves. So don't give up on it just because you don't see what you're particularly wanting to see. Some of you may be wanting that sunny and 75 all winter long. I think everybody will be happy once we get to March 1st with how the winter turned out.
Yeah, I would totally agree, Chris. I think, once again, these are forecasts for the region, and it takes one good event to get this. That's the thing you always got to remember about western North Carolina winter weather. Yep. We can get nickel and dime sometimes, but one decent event, we had it last year, and you can reach or even eclipse your average. So if you're a snow lover and you might see that these numbers are a little below average, don't fret. We still have an opportunity to get some snow for you this winter.
And it's funny, you know, as social media evolves, you're going to see snow maps go out there. We'll continue with our snow and winter weather outlook out 12 or 13 days that we do, and we'll start that up in late November going out. But don't base off of one model run. Remember, when you're forecasting a snow event, it's an evolution of a forecast, not just what one scenario prints out. So as you see those this winter, get excited about them, but keep it in the back of your mind. You may be heartbroken too, because those models change from run to run.
Yeah, they definitely do, Chris. But that is a look at our winter forecast here at Foothills Action Network. Thank you for supporting us and our venture, giving you the weather across the foothills of Western Piedmont. We're going to keep this up on our social media feeds. You can find all this information over our website, foothillsweather.net. We'll post this video to our YouTube page. And just stay with us as we get ready to cover winter weather here in the next few weeks.
I'm excited. My favorite time of the year. Go check out Me Paloma.